I do want to talk about policy a bit. And Scott, I'll start with you on this. As we examine these things, there are policy choices and desires that people have made, whether it's to reduce the harm that policing causes in America on communities by removing their funding, limiting the involvement of police in local communities, whether there are federal programs to facilitate people having jobs, people having access to income, federal programs to change the racial wealth gap and earnings gap that exists in America. When we discuss these policies, the more you talk about them, there's going to be a fierce opposition from a group of people who are disproportionately powered due to the structure of America. And a lot of us, work in organizations where the people at the top do represent that movement a lot. So how does one approach that movement when you're at such a position where you are depowered, not just from your station in the country, but you're financially depowered and you don't necessarily feel that you have the ability to speak to the issues that need to be addressed?
Yeah, again, this problem starts with, honestly, it starts with the heart and how we could have policies, but what we've got to do along with these policies is try to find ways to, again, change the hearts of people so we can change policy. Again, policies are terrific, and as you say, there's going to be significant opposition to it. And again, there's people, again, that are much smarter than me that can figure those kind of things out.
Justin, your position as an NFL player, you run into that as well, because there's a structure, right, that feels as though that you should speak a certain way, respond a certain way to different stimuli, and you have to push back there, and you also have to measure the potential backlash. How does that hinder your entrance into this conversation, and how has it in the past?
No, I mean, it's very difficult. Obviously, everyone saw what happened with Colin Kaepernick, how an issue or, a protest against an issue can become, very polarizing, can become, misconstrued when people are trying to obfuscate from what he was actually trying to draw attention to. And now, obviously, he's very vindicated. But yeah, it's tough, it's tough. But, what I always fall back on is whenever someone tries to tell an athlete, oh, shut up and dribble, shut up and play football, whatever, or any form of that. Obviously it might not be that explicit, but in so many words they can say that. What I would say to them is, would you tell your local accountant that? Would you tell your plumber that? Would you tell the person who's mowing your lawn, or your Uber driver, right? So we are as much a part of society as anyone else. We are citizens. We pay taxes, a lot of taxes, right? So we want to have a say in these policies, right? And so whenever someone is doing that to you, trying to kneecap you, they're trying to deplatform you, or make you seem less because you play a sport, so you shouldn't have a say in politics. Obviously, I think that's something that just nowadays it's easy to look at and just laugh at almost, right? Because I'm a citizen too, so I have a voice, and what they really are scared of is you using your platform to actually affect change, right? And like Dr. Rice was saying earlier, we love that some of the statues are coming down. We love that you're painting Black Lives Matter on a street, right? But we want to see actual change. We can't have that and then not have the policies that are going to change that, right? That not going to have universal health care for all, right? We're not going to have public colleges available and free to people who are in inner cities, right? So these are the things that we actually need to see change, right? We need to see police defunded. Right. Look, I grew up in a suburb. I know what it's like to have a small police department. Right. And all those other resources are going to community programs, are going to the schools. Right. So that's what we need to see. We need to stop punishing poverty and actually start trying to help people who are in poverty get out of that poverty. America used to be a place where for some people, obviously not for all, where you could climb out of poverty. That is becoming less and less the case nowadays. I think we have to open our eyes to that, not just be like America is the best. No, how are we going to improve America so we have better access to things for all people, right? And there's so many resources in this country for that to happen. But if you're okay with having over 600 billionaires, yet having 75% of the country living paycheck to paycheck, then that just means you don't care about working people. Let's call it for what it is. And so I think that's something that we all have to confront. And I think this pandemic has really opened a lot of people's eyes to the fact that there is really a two-tier system when it comes to things in America. You either have access to something or you don't, and a lot of people don't have access to these things. So I'm glad that we're starting to actually have these conversations, and that we're allowed to have these conversations, because these are important conversations to have. And this is how we're actually going to affect change, by getting on platforms like this and talking about things like that.
I think what Justin said is so important, as he's using his amplified democratic space, which is what you're supposed to do. Everybody's supposed to have a voice. And I think it's so important to call a thing a thing. So we're talking about how it is that policies are set up so that folks who are, who are billionaires have the most say so. It becomes important for us to examine that. What is success? What is power? How is it that you share it? If we're talking about democracy, if we're talking about how everybody is supposed to have a reasoned voice, if we're talking about lifting up and understanding and respecting the most vulnerable of us, those attributes and those characteristics that are the most admirable in terms of ideally of this great experiment that is America, the American enterprise, then we have to do a lot of refiguring. We have to do a lot of refiguring if we are objectifying people, if we're calling them outside of their name, if we're considering them as being less than because of what their socioeconomic status is, because of what their sexual expression might be, their gender orientation is, if we're putting them in certain in certain pockets and are diminishing who they are because of what their race and ethnicity is. We really have to do some soul searching right now. And again, I don't mean to, and I don't want to be also, kind of pie in the sky, but we have such a great and pregnant opportunity right now to really check ourselves. And so if we're really down for the cause, if we're really interested in progressing a nation, progressing a people, we're not just talking about progressing Black folk and progressing brown folk and people who are in the margins. Again, it's very important for us to look at this dynamic of racism and look at it as a practitioner and as a target. Certainly, Black and brown folks and folks who are in the margins are targets of racism, but we really are talking about the soul of America when we're talking about people who practice and benefit from marginalizing and commodifying persons. And so I think that we have to do work in that space, and that has to do with holding people who are in power, whether they be billionaires, whether they be white folks. We have to hold them accountable in terms of how it is that we define a thing and call a thing a thing. It becomes so important to do. And that's the difficult part that a lot of people don't want to be in conversation around and don't want to necessarily be pushed toward.
And one version or route to accountability would come through the ballot box. It's not an end-all, be-all option, as you see, as many people have seen. They've elected mayors and city council members in their local communities, yet the police would still continue to kill people there almost wantonly without consequence. So elections aren't the total solution, but they are one means to do so.